the common definition of AI is a chatbot. So something we haven't really mentioned is that .NET MAUI, it's an evolution of Xamarin, which was the previous name and the previous platform for cross-platform development. And as a Xamarin developer, I was just, adding the chatbot to an application was really an offline one.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Modern.NET Show, the premier .NET podcast focusing entirely on the knowledge, tools, and frameworks that all .NET developers should have in their toolbox. I'm your host, Jamie Taylor, bringing you conversations with the brightest minds in the .NET ecosystem. Today we are joined by Codina Merigo to talk about the cross-section of .NET MAUI and AI, her new book AI-Enabled Apps with .NET MAUI, and some of the scenarios where you might want to include AI in your applications.
To get privacy by design nowadays is really impossible. So if you need to really have something disconnected from the internet, maybe you'll need a tiny offline model that just, does pick to test.
Along the way, we discuss the differences between local, as in on-device AI models, and the frontier, as in online models. We talk about where models really help with accessibility in your applications, and we talk about where you can go to get started learning about this whole new world. Before we jump in, a quick reminder. If the Modern.NET Show has become part of your learning journey, then please consider supporting us through Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee. Every contribution helps us to continue bringing you these in-depth conversations with industry experts. You'll find all the links in the show notes. So let's sit back, open up a terminal, type in .NET New Podcast, and we'll dive into the core of modern.NET. So, Codrina, welcome to the show. I hear this is your first time doing a podcast, so I'm very honored to be part of that journey for you. We're going to be talking about .NET MAUI and AI in a moment, but first off, as I said, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jamie, and thank you for having me.
Oh, not a problem. Always lovely to speak to all sorts of people from around the world about all different technology that everybody's excited about. So I wonder, before we get started, could you talk a little bit like maybe an intro about yourself and how you got started in development? And then we'll talk about the book that you've got coming out. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Codrina Merigo. I'm based in Italy, but I'm actually from Romania. Now I like to describe myself as an international speaker and most recently a book author. But what I am really, at the core is just a developer, a very curious one. I started a long time ago in the year 2000 when I was studying in Romania, thanks to an European project that they were getting computers in schools. And I was fascinated. We started developing some crazy things back then, and I feel that I never stopped. I studied ICT in high school. When I moved to Italy, I graduated cybersecurity, and I started working as a software engineer, more on the .NET part and Microsoft technologies. Recently, not so recently, when I discovered cross-platform and mobile development, it really changed my idea because, we all had a phone in our hand and was really exciting to see your ideas coming to life. And yeah, for me, the normal evolution was to go into the .NET MAUI part and just start seeing what it has to offer to developers and to everyone. On a professional level, I'm a product manager and I work in healthcare, but my hobby is still developing every time I have some free time.
That's cool. There's a couple of points there that I'd love to quickly cover, if that's okay with you. I like the idea that you can take the developer out of the development job, but you can't take the developer away from their tools, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah. Always a developer, I feel like, no matter how, the corporate world might change after some time, but I still like to just try it myself to see it work, and debugging, I think it's something that really sticks to what I like and how I am also on a day-to-day life.
Yeah. And I've read a book a few years back called Managing Humans, and it talks about if you manage engineers, then it's a good idea, even if you've moved past the day-to-day engineering from a software engineering perspective, of course, is to try and keep a hand in what's happening, because then you can, when an engineer turns to you and says, that's not possible, you can say, actually, I think it is. But also it means that when you're asking, is this possible? You already kind of understand a little bit about what they're saying back to you. Because I feel like from an engineering to a management point of view, that discussion has a wide chasm, right? And that for people who are in management who have never been engineers can kind of switch off when an engineer is discussing, yeah, we can do this, but also here's the reason why we can't do it. I think it's a problem on both sides. It's not just management switching off. I think it's engineers being super interested in what they can and can't do and not really being able to explain to the management side of it why it can't happen from a non-engineering perspective. But then management coming to that conversation with not having that information. So I think it's a good idea for engineers who go into a management role to keep an eye on what's happening and keep trying it outside of their day-to-day work.
Yeah, and I really love to, introduce myself in a new project and to tell the software engineers, speak technical to me, don't be afraid. I know, APIs, I know what Postman is, send me everything. And it's really nice to create this connection because sometimes, as you say, it's not that direct that this tell me, I don't know, the cache is not working or things that might seem too technical. And on the other side, sometimes I was in a position when, a dev tell me, I need 5 days to do that. And I will be like, do you really need 5 days? So maybe they hate me or they love me, but it's really nice to, optimize meetings and just tell me whatever. Don't try to over explain things that are really direct, at least for me.
Yeah, no, I fully get that. The other thing that I was hoping to sort of cover real quick in what you'd said in your intro was the idea of discovering cross-platform development, and we all have a phone in our pockets, in our bags, in our hands, wherever they are. One of the things that I've noticed, I've got kids. They're all teenagers now, which makes me feel really old. But also, they all have phones, right? And they don't interact with computers. There's a whole side story about digital literacy that I could go on a tangent for hours. But I grew up in the era where my first computer didn't have an operating system, right?
Yeah.
It didn't have windows and menus, icons and pointers. It booted into an interpreter and you had to run your applications from there one at a time. It didn't do multitasking or anything like that, right? And so I've seen the evolution of going from a purely text-based interface through the many different versions of Windows icons, menus, and pointers, and the many different graphical interfaces to a point where I've brought this up in an earlier episode this season, actually, where a family member who is in that teen bracket needed to print off their resume, their CV, and they didn't know how to do it. So I sat them down in front of the computer and I said, well, open it on here. Okay. We went through the journey of opening a file on a desktop computer. And then I said, so to print it, you push the print button. And they said, which one's the print button? And I said, the one that looks like a printer. And then they turned to me and said, what does a printer look like? Like they have no idea, which is both amazing and hilarious. But it kind of fits in that idea that you had about everyone has a phone in their hand. So let's make an app for that, right? Rather than targeting desktop to start with, which I feel like in the mid 2000s, it feels like there was this push for build it on the desktop first and then shrink it down to the mobile viewport, like responsive websites. But now I'm very happy to see that it's gone the other way. It's like build it for the mobile first, then explode it out to the desktop.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I actually recall when I started my, web developer, because I'm coming from web development, I was working on the very first mobile banking in Italy, and I was struggling to do their mobile version because everything was so big on the desktop. And I've been there working with everyone and people not really understanding where the things are hiding because there is not all the space. And on the other hand, I feel like the new generations, I have a family friend, he has a kid, and he will start typing on the TV every time because he expected to be touchscreen, things that when I was a child, I never even imagined to touch, apart from the electricity that will have come out back then. But now it's just so crazy. And even my parents now, they want enough for everything, and there is not yet enough for everything. But they want to have everything, I don't know, to pay their bills and everything. And yeah, I feel the the struggle because now I don't feel like people still have printers in their home because everything is digital. And yeah, I feel your kid saying, what's a printer look like? Or a fax machine. I think no one really knows how that looks.
I remember when I was asked that question, what does a printer look like? I responded with, that hit me right in the ibuprofen. Like, my lower back really hurts now. You made me feel so old by asking that question, sort of thing. Oh my goodness. You've got this book coming out. We'll come back to like cross-platform development in a moment. But just before we get any further, what is the book called and what's it about?
Yeah, so the book is called AI-enabled apps with .NET MAUI, how to build cross-platform .NET apps with the latest capabilities. I know it's a long title. I had to read it out, but I want it to be really, on point. And the book, it's about how to add AI to your existing .NET MAUI application and how to integrate all the latest AI capabilities that we have around.
Okay. So let's dive straight into that, the whole thing, right? We've talked about mobile app development. We've talked about cross-platform. We've mentioned .NET MAUI a few times. You see, what I know about the listener demographic of this show is that there's lots of people who haven't had a chance to try out lots of different technologies. And just sort of to level set, could you quickly give us a description of what .NET MAUI is and what it tries to achieve? I mean, it does achieve it, but like what it aims to achieve.
Yeah, so .NET MAUI, and MAUI it's an acronym, stands for Multi-Platform App UI. It's a cross-platform framework from Microsoft and allows you to build native application using C# and .NET, so the Microsoft technologies. From one single shared code base, I know we only spoke about mobile things, so you can target Android, iOS, but also you can target Windows, macOS, Linux, and Samsung TV. So it's really one single shared code base for all these platforms. And it works on phones, tablets, desktop, and some offline environments too. I want to emphasize the fact that at the end, you'll have native applications and you can easily interact with all the sensors and all the capabilities you have, like in your phones, in your tablet, like, camera, microphone, and everything. This is, I would say, in a nutshell. If you know Microsoft technologies, it's really, really easy to start your cross-platform development journey.
Right, right. Just to expand on, I mean, you said a whole bunch there, but just to expand on something that is very, very new at the time of recording, Linux on the desktop is now a targeted platform that .NET MAUI supports. I think it was only announced a couple months back as we are recording.
Yeah.
But as long as you will have the GTK libraries installed or have a desktop environment that supports GTK, then you can target that Linux distribution for .NET MAUI apps. Now, I've had to say a whole bunch of stuff there to caveat that. If you don't know what Linux is, just ignore all of that. Or if you've never used Linux on the desktop, ignore all of that and just take the unintentional ignorance of it now targets Linux. For the Linux users out there, yes, okay, if you're on KDE, if you're on Plasma, if you're on Cinnamon, if you're on Mate, if you're on any of these other desktop environments that are not maybe 100% supporting GTK, then you will have a bad time. But fellow Linux people will know, because I'm a part-time Linux user, fellow Linux people will know that there is no one Linux and there is no one desktop. Like on macOS, I'm talking to Codrina right now on macOS. I have Finder, which is effectively my desktop experience. On Windows, you have Explorer, which is effectively your desktop experience. On Linux, there are a million of them. They all use different toolings, different versions of different tools. And so targeting Linux in bunny quotes is super difficult. It's a non-trivial task. So I fully understand why the Maui team and the contributors have targeted GTK, because it's likely the biggest user. It likely covers most of the users of Linux on the desktop. Sorry, I just wanted to jump in and share a bit of expertise there before somebody listening goes, well, actually.
Yeah, that's a great point. And also a huge shout out to the community that's behind all the Linux GTK work. And also to remember everyone that even if it's a framework from Microsoft, you can find everything on GitHub. So it's really transparent. If you have an idea, if you want to build your own Linux, you can just work with all the community. And it's really, really big, nice family, I would say. And I'm happy that you have more Linux experience that I have. We can close the circle here with all the things that we can support.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, how do I put this? I need to find my words very carefully. People within our industry like to point out where something is not 100% correct and then hyper focus on that rather than the point you're trying to make. This is neither a good thing nor a bad thing. I'm not trying to say that it is either of those things, but what I've noticed is that every time that I mention or a guest mentions Linux support on this show, somebody jumps into the comments and says, well, actually, and I'm like, can you, like, I totally get that on your build of Arch Linux, where you've stripped everything out and you don't have libcurl and you don't have this, that, and the other, which means the .NET won't run on that. I get that it won't run on your machine, but your machine is not 100, it is not representative of maybe the 80% of Linux on the desktop users, right?
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Okay, so we know what .NET MAUI is, and we know that we can use C# and XAML and other technologies to create a cross-platform app, allowing us to target, like you said, Android, iOS, macOS, Windows, some variants of Linux. I can't remember whether you mentioned this, but it's one that is actually supported Tizen,
Yeah.
and a whole bunch of other platforms, right? So we can create these cross-platform rich GUI apps. Now, here comes the difficult question. When you say AI enabled,
Yeah.
what do you mean by that?
So I know that maybe now the common definition of AI is a chatbot. So something we haven't really mentioned is that .NET MAUI, it's an evolution of Xamarin, which was the previous name and the previous platform for cross-platform development. And as a Xamarin developer, I was just, adding the chatbot to an application was really an offline one. So a lot of ifs in there. And then when AI came, everything seemed like you need the chatbot to do your thing. With AI enabled, I wanted to add something that is a little bit broader. It's not just adding, a chatbot to an application. You can add a lot of different services. You can understand speech or, have some speech to text capabilities, even recognize images, have recommendation, and a lot of things that are outside of the chatbot experience. I guess I started the example with all the chatbots, but it's more than that, as we developers know what really AI is about.
Okay, so it's more like less just chatbots, but more sort of like, is it agents? I guess it is agents, because you're asking some AI system, here is a picture, extract the text, or here is some text, give me the sentiment. I mean, I'm greatly reducing what you've just said, but like if we take one of those tasks, like maybe I have, here's a good one. It's the Andrei Karpathy, I think he calls it menu something or other. There's like a rad menu or something app that he's of vibe coded, where you point your camera at a menu that is just text, and then it re-renders the menu with images of what those items on the menu may look like. Because if you don't know what it's called, but you know what it looks like, that's going to help you out. Or maybe you're out and about in a foreign country and you can't read the signs, so you point your phone at the sign and it translates the sign and then writes over the image, if that makes sense, re-renders the image.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of thing we're talking about?
Yeah, so all these capabilities and, calling different tools, APIs, and just doing some kind of magic that will help us, as you say, on our even day-to-day work. Way beyond only a chatbot that you ask something and that's it.
Okay, cool. So we'll get on to the API bits in a minute, but for the folks who are very into the AI space, as I assume you are, Codrina, are you talking cloud-based models, or are you talking things like the Geminis and the small language models, which can kind of work on a mobile device if you don't mind having your mobile device plugged in at all times?
Yeah, so in the book, I cover both. I cover the
Ah,
online services, and then I also have some example of really, really tiny models that can fit on your phone without, overheating it. So you can do some specific actions without the need of the full AI power. So you don't need, I don't know, a Porsche to go and do your grocery. You just need a car. A simple one can really do your job. And also some examples of like industries that can use some offline models and put them on a phone that, take a picture and recognize what is it, and that's it. So it's really important. And this is general. When you choose a model, to really understand what you want to achieve with the model every time, because you might run into additional costs that you don't really want, and to really target exactly your use case. And yeah, as I said, as a product manager, I'm really focused all the time on what is the application needs to be done, what is actually the intent of it. And this is also how I structure the book. What you want to do, it's already a model, you need to build a model. So on a side note, I'm not a data scientist, so I prefer just searching all the models that we have and to see if it's something we can just use. For sure, if you have a good data scientist, work with that, create your perfect model for you. And in the book, I've used the most famous one from Azure, OpenAI, and some local models. For sure, you can expand that to your enterprise offline models if someone has that in their company. It's really, really easy to just add them to their application.
I really like that because I feel like maybe the gold rush has ended. I'm not sure. But there feels very much like, or at least there has been over the past few years, very much like, quick, we'll use the frontier online model to do something for our app. Just plug it into, OpenAI, or plug it into Azure, plug it into AWS, and let them handle the model and all that kind of stuff. Whereas actually thinking about, which is what an engineer and a project manager, a product manager are supposed to do, right? We're supposed to think about what is the problem we need to solve? What are our constraints? And how do we fit the solution rather than crowbarring a solution into the problem? How do we best solve the problem given the constraints that we have? What are some of the reasons why you may go for an online model versus an offline model, or an offline model versus an online model? And for folks who are listening, the online models, they scale very, very quickly, and they're the most powerful ones because they're sitting on a server, or maybe a rank of servers, or maybe in a data center. Whereas the local models are constrained by the hardware that you have. If you don't have very powerful hardware, probably isn't going to run very well. Is that the only reason, or are there other reasons?
So it depends also on the industry you are. And as a software architect, to get privacy by design nowadays is really impossible. So if you need to really have something disconnected from the internet, maybe you'll need a tiny offline model. Just, I don't know, does pick to test in somewhere underground. So you don't really have connection. So that is really important to understand your use case and what you really want to do. Even if I think maybe the future more hybrid nowadays, depends on the scenarios. You might just need to call a really powerful model or use a tiny one. And as you said, really depends on the hardware and what you can afford to spend on these different scenarios, and how accurate you want your model to be. So there are really a lot of things to consider and to really get the best of the AI model you're using.
I really appreciate your point about the privacy first is a supremely important thing, especially for folks like you and I in the sort of EU space. Let's put the politics to one side about the UK not being part of the EU for a second, but in the EU space, we tend to be more concerned with individual privacy than perhaps other countries are. And so at the moment, in the background, whilst this conversation is happening, there is a big move in the sort of EU technology space to move off of US controlled systems for worries about privacy. Now, whether there should be worries about privacy, I don't know. Whether it's just a bunch of people saying, let's move everything to the EU, I don't know. But your point about privacy is a very, very important one that touches on things that I really care about. But this may be a question you may not be able to answer. But I thought that if you use an Azure-based model, it's constrained within the area in which you are using that model, right? That's probably a really horrible way of putting it. But I know that, for instance, in the UK, if I use a Azure-provided model, the idea is, and the promise that they make is, that your data never leaves the UK data center. Whether it gets used for other things whilst it's in the data center, I don't know. But like, is that not a thing? Like, is that not something that I guess what I'm asking here is, like, there are industries, I guess, where online models are just completely forbidden, right?
Yeah, so I know that especially the big recommendation and also the general data protection regulation we have, it's that you need to have your data close to the source. So if I'm in Italy, I will need to have a data source here in Italy. And as I said, I'm also in healthcare, so this is like our number one priority. And I know that also on Azure, you can even set additional guardrails on your AI. So if you want to filter more, if you want to really do those kind of things. But there might be some industries that they don't really want to be on cloud. Maybe they have their own server. And I'm thinking more about some banks. I think they still have servers in the basement. I'm not saying that that's where you should put your server, but I know for sure working as a consultant in the past that they are really strict to those kind of things because they just want to be very, very careful about the privacy and where the data stays. And also the way that some trials work around Europe, they don't want that anything gets online because, hackers might be there. So, and I might be biased by my cybersecurity degree because I know that as soon there is a door to outside world, someone can break through it. So they don't want doors and not even windows. So everything can be totally offline in some really regulated industries that we may have.
Sure. And that makes sense, right? I really like the idea of the hybrid, the system that you were talking about. I know we've not gotten to the book yet, but we will get to that in a moment. But I really like the idea of the hybrid system. Is this similar to, like, I know that on some versions of iOS, I can say the word which gets Siri's attention and then give it a thing, ask it a question. And if it's unable to figure it out locally, it can say, hey, would you like me to ask ChatGPT for you? And then it does a anonymized request up to ChatGPT, asks the question and streams the response back. Is that the kind of thing you're thinking of, where, like, try to do it locally offline, and if it can't entirely be done offline, maybe take pieces of it and push it to an online model and say, hey, just focus on this one task, not the whole overarching goal that we want to achieve. Just like, here's user story number one of our app. If I was to use like an agile sort of idea, like carve a bit of the task off and give it to an online model.
Yeah, this was something I had in mind. It really depends on your ask. And we know that the prompt is really important every time you interact with AI, but maybe you need something quick and easy without all the. And I like that nowadays, these chatbots, they are starting to give you a lot of information. But maybe you just need something really direct, I don't know, on a phone number, or you don't want them to do the call for you or prepare the call outline. You just want one tiny thing. And we can also dig more into the user experience part. So to really let the user know what you're doing and to make it that he has the power. And as you said, under the hood, to understand if you need to do something offline, quick, or something really powerful as a large language model in the cloud.
Ooh. And I guess there's a lot of concern about the amount of power and the amount of water that is used to cool these data centers. And I suppose, and I'm making a massive inference here, and there will be a actually person listening along, but I suppose if you can keep the task on the device without having to push it up to an online LLM of some kind, that you're probably using less power than you would sending it over to a big machine, having the big machine crunch the numbers and come back. I don't think it works like that, but I feel like it probably feels a little bit like that.
Yeah, and I think we can simplify it like that, or maybe also intercept. I know that at the beginning, a lot of people used to say thanks to the AI, and that will trigger another call, as it says, so another water and electricity consumption. So maybe you can catch this thing if your user say thanks, you have a predefined thing and say you're welcome, and that's it, without really, disturb a large language model to say fancy things back to a thank you message. So the more you work with these things, you can really go into all these details. And that's why I really think that hybrid, and maybe going back to the old if then else,
Mhm.
to really try to make the best of your experience for you, your pocket, and your users.
Today's episode of the Modern.net Show is brought to you by RJJ Software, strategic technology consulting for ambitious SMEs. You know me as the host of this podcast, but here's what you might not know. I'm also a Microsoft MVP who's helped businesses from Formula One teams to funded startups to transform technology from a cost center to a competitive advantage. At RJJ Software, we specialize in 3 things that matter to growing businesses: AI that actually delivers return on investment, not hype, just practical implementations that pay for themselves; developer experience optimization. We've helped teams to achieve 99% faster deployments and 3x productivity gains; and strategic technology decisions, from architecture reviews to fractional CTO services. The difference? We don't just advise. We ensure successful implementation through knowledge transfer to your team. If you're an SME leader wondering why your technology investments aren't delivering, or if you're facing critical decisions about AI, modernization, or team productivity, let's talk. Visit rjj-software.co.uk/podcast to book a strategic consultation. Now let's get back to today's episode. Like we said earlier on, you did a much better job than I did about engineering, right? Rather than just saying, we'll just throw it at the online LLM, it'll be fine, they can take care of it. Actually engineering the path through the code, The example you gave there was fantastic. Like, if a user says thank you, or a phrase that equates to thank you, deal with it locally, don't push it up to the cloud. I would much rather live in a world where people are saying thank you to their AI assistants, not because of some kind of fuzzy wuzzy, it's great to tell the AI thank you because when it takes over the world, it won't come and kill me.
Exactly.
But it's less of that, but more a case of, if we are telling our users not to say thank you, then we're putting them in a mode where they are less likely to say thank you in the real world, right? And we're teaching people to be slightly less polite, whereas actually keeping that idea alive and dealing with it locally on the device, that's a great way to deal with that. Because I think there was an early episode of the show, I think season 7, so last year at this point, where I talked to Amit Bari, who at the time was one of the folks who was pretty high up in the AI space. And we talked about passing a message to a small language model first, passing a prompt to a small language model, whose job it is not to answer the query, but to figure out, where should I route this prompt to? Like, there's a large language model for accounting. There's a large language model for finance. There's a large language model for C# and a separate large language model for Python. If I ask the small language model a question about Python, it's just going to reroute my prompt to the Python LLM. And I love that idea. And it fits with your idea of hybrid models as well.
Yeah, we can spend some time in the very first stage of planning to really understand what we want to do, and to really understand. And as I said, maybe hybrid is just the future, and now it's like common work to decide. And for sure, lately there has been this famous fast food chatbot that they are using, I think, a really big model, Claude or something, to just order food from the fast food. And user understood that they can ask this chatbot to do everything because it just can do that. There are also, big companies that just connect to the biggest model that they can have and will do the job for you. So that was a really, really funny thing that I saw I think last week.
Yeah, I've seen them before myself where like some fast food chain in the US has a chatbot on their website and it's just hooked up to a large language model that knows the menu. And someone had said, I'd love to order one of these things, but first, write me a recursive algorithm that figures out prime numbers or something. And it just spat out some Python because it is just connected to a frontier large language model rather than a
Yeah.
trained one that only knows that the menu exists, right?
Yeah, and I was also speaking about it with my sister. So she's an artist. She's far away from development and everything. And she kind of asked me, do you really need AI for that? I know that we need to be pro AI in this call, but she also create like an example. So I don't know, if you have fries on your order, can't I just prompt you some sauces and that's it because they are all connected. So I really like that everyone is thinking about AI and how it's getting to our day-to-day life and all these offline things that they can also happen. So that's why I'm really into the mixed scenarios and the hybrid one.
Oh, 100%. I think you're absolutely right. I think we need to approach it with a level of pragmatism and really questioning, like, do we really need this? Which is kind of like, to go slightly political again, but that's kind of the point of GDPR, right? It's like, do you really need this information? No, then don't collect it. Do you really need to use a frontier model that has knowledge of everything that has ever happened in order to be able to allow users to order food on your website? No. Then use one that is trained specifically on your data, right?
Yeah, and that's why we are truly believers that we still need men in the middle when taking these decisions. And I love the word copilot. I know has been, stalled somehow by Microsoft, but this is what I'm seeing AI for us developers on our day-to-day life. And this is also how I kind of structured the book because maybe you already have an application and you just want to add some AI in there, and I'm trying to show you all the different types of AI you can use and can make your app more smart, I would say, with all these models that we have around.
So, with that said, then, what are the basic building blocks of a .NET MAUI app which has been AI enabled? I'll let you choose one, but let's choose a scenario, maybe a scenario from the book, or maybe a scenario from what you've worked on recently, where you have a .NET MAUI app and you've had to bolt on some AI-enabled feature. Bolt on's probably the wrong word, but like if I have a .NET MAUI app and I want to add AI systems to it, and I've done the legwork, I've decided, yep, we have to do this as AI enabled. Maybe I'm doing it on-prem. On-prem's the wrong word. On device, or maybe I'm going to the cloud. Like, what's the basic building blocks that I need other than my .NET MAUI app and can perhaps connection to the internet?
Yeah, if you already have an application, there may be something for your user. I will start on the UI, the things you see. If you want to just add a chatbot, that's cool. Why not? You just need to hook your application to a service. If it's OpenAI, Azure AI, or the others, you can enrich your experience and you can deal with all the things that we see now on chatbots, like conversation history, if you want memory, and maybe you can also have some predefined prompts. So if you have an application that creates like itineraries, it's really something you can add a chatbot to work on your trips and vacation plans that you have, and to really make your user choose the ones that are really based on their preferences. One thing that it's easy to add, and this can open the chapter on accessibility. So you can hook services to your existing application to create text to speech. There are some people that are maybe visually impaired and they are using some built in things, create speech to text, but you can personalize that experience and use personal voices, tones, and maybe, I don't know, accents, so your user can really integrate with your application in a new way. So that's a scenario that came to my mind. And for sure, another thing that it's really hard to do its translations. So when you want to localize your application, you just translate everything. And maybe you can also use a model that do that for you without a lot of agencies or colleagues that speak different languages. So these kind of things can be added really simple to an existing application, and then you can really use the best of these models that are already available.
Right. Okay. And depending on the power required, sometimes we might say horsepower, right? Depending on the NPU power required to do those facilities, you can either do them online or on the device, right? I mean, some things maybe not so much. I have a feeling that like translation and localization is probably something best that you throw to the cloud, because that feels like it's a bigger task than just translate this sentence, because it has to be translate this sentence for this label in the context of this button, in the context of this screen, right?
Yeah, but there is also some tiny models for speech. I can think of the whisper model that are really tiny, and you can integrate even offline and just have a button that will just speak and to your user.
Okay, yeah, the Whisper models is a really good shout. If listeners have ever read the transcriptions, you've interacted with one of the Whisper models, because although you haven't interacted with it directly, I use one of the Whisper models to get a 50 to 70% correct transcription for each episode, right? So you've been doing it for, if anyone's been reading the transcriptions, you've been interacting with the output of Whisper for about a year and a half, right? It's really good.
Yeah, and it's all over now, and I really love that. And there are also some other tiny models you can use. I'm thinking also about sentiment analysis. Maybe you want to create an offline mood tracker. And I think that's an example from the book. So I want it to be offline because it's related to some of my medical data, but I can create a diary and we get how was I feeling that day. So maybe this is a total new application or something that you can add to your existing application and make it work offline. So there are some really nice things you can use or add to your application. For sure, if you have application that have a lot of data, a lot of text, or you want to offer support to your application, you can create these models that really help you and help your user too.
Absolutely. I worry that part of the battle when looking at specialized models is like knowing that they exist. So I wonder, I know we've talked about Whisper a little bit, but are there any other local models that you can run locally that you'd recommend for small tasks? So for instance, if I need to add alt text to an image, now this is giving away a whole bunch of stuff about how I work, but if I need to add alt text to an image on a website, first thing I do is I throw it at Lava, because Lava has the ability to see images. So I'll say, hey, Lava, give me a starting point for the alt text for this image. 60%, 70%, 80% of the time it gets it right. And other times it just fails miserably. But it gives me, I don't just copy paste that content, it gives me a place to start, because I suck at describing what an image is, right? But I do know that alt text is required for folks with accessibility issues. So what would be Codrina's maybe top 3 models for specific tasks? So like we said Whisper, so that could be one of them. Whisper for either transcribing text or doing text to speech. Like, what are 2 other local models that folks maybe don't know about? Because remember, folks listening to this, they're listening in going, I haven't had a chance to play with AI yet. You're talking about doing it locally. Which models do I use for what, right?
Yeah, so in the book, I have an example of using image detection on specific image. So with the custom vision services from Azure, you can create your offline model based on your images. And in the book, I use a stop sign offline. So you just need around 50 images. You run it through the custom vision part and will give back to you a tiny model that does just one thing: recognize an object inside an image. So if you're working in some industries that needs to, I don't know, recognize faulty things, you can create your tiny models directly with custom vision. And some other tiny models that I was experiencing with are still related to image recognition. So I'm a plant lover. I know that there are big models that help you recognize your plants, but I was having an idea to slice it based on the area. And I also love going hiking. So maybe if I'm going in the Alps, I can have a tiny model on my phone that would recognize the plants in there. So sometimes you just need to narrow what you want to achieve with your model, and you can create a tiny one with custom vision without being a data scientist. Or you can go to the Hugging Face community. There are lots of examples in there. So that was also where I was trying to get some other examples for the book and to see if there are tiny models that do voice recognition, as I said, text to speak to text, and some other tiny things that work. I was more focused on the phone, but for sure, if you have a server that is a little bit more powerful, you can also increase the size of the model and see what it has to offer for you.
You know that moment when a technical concept finally clicks? That's what we're all about here at the Modern.net Show. We can stay independent thanks to listeners like you. If you've learned something valuable from the show, please consider joining our Patreon or buy me a coffee. You'll find links in the show notes. We're a listener-supported and, at times, ad-supported production, so every bit of support that you can give makes a difference. Thank you. We're coming up to a wrap-up point here, and I appreciate that we've only really scratched the surface because we haven't really talked about the book, really. We've just talked about .NET MAUI and enabling AI within those apps. But like you mentioned Hugging Face there, that's a really, really good resource. For folks who don't know, Hugging Face is one of the many sites that hosts a whole bunch of models. And whilst you can't go right-click download, if you're using Ollama, Llama CPP, or LM Studio or something like that, and you ask it to download a model, 9 times out of 10, it's going to Hugging Face and downloading that model. So that's where a lot of the models are kind of stored if you want to run them online. You know, I've got, I mentioned Lava earlier on. I have a whole bunch of models I'm running locally on this machine. It's a MacBook Air M2, right? So it's not super duper powerful, but it can run them on this machine. It's a case of seconds per token rather than tokens per second, but it runs on this machine, and I'm blown away by that. Because like in 2018, I went to a conference. We'll get back to the question in a minute. But like just having this memory of like 2018, I was at a Microsoft conference, and there's Scott Guthrie on stage showing an app that he'd built that recognizes whether something has a cat in it or not. And that was like frontier in 2018. And now you can do that on your phone, right? That's crazy.
Yeah, and also mind-blowing. I have been presenting this specific use case in conferences, and I have more coming up this year. And I personally use a kind of an old Android, so you don't need to have the latest phone with all the top memory. If your model is optimized, in these services, as you said, help you also optimize these models. And I have also some consideration in the book on the format, the bit level, and some things that might help you understand exactly which model to choose out also of the community models you can find on this platform. It's really interesting to see that it works, and you don't really need a lot of time to just implement that. And that's why also I love the .NET MAUI, because if it works on an old Android, for sure works on the latest iPhone or some other phones, and it helps us to connect with our user regardless their device. So I put these two things together and just looking at the power of AI in different examples. And offline AI is also known as Edge AI, and there are a lot of examples also from Microsoft, and I think they're also expanding to Android now on the Edge AI part. So hopefully we'll have more models to just use AI on our devices soon.
Sounds great. So where, other than the book, and I appreciate I'm asking you for your sources, but like other than the book, somebody's listening to this and going, I'm going to buy the book, but until that arrives, how do I go about getting started with all of this stuff, right? Because You've mentioned a whole bunch of things there that we haven't had a chance to talk about. Edge AI. Both of us talked about Hugging Face. We talked about all the different, without saying it, quantization of models, right? And all that kind of stuff, right? So let's pretend I've been working in enterprise and I haven't had the chance to do anything with AI yet for a whole bunch of reasons. And now we're 6 years in and I'm going, oh no, now I need to learn about AI. How in the heck do I get started?
So I actually personally started from Azure. And, working in a Microsoft environment, everything was on Azure. And then I was seeing, okay, they already have the cognitive services. So these services have been around from some time and you can detect things. And the great thing about Azure and now Microsoft Foundry, the new renamed platform, is that you have playground for everything. So I would suggest to start in there, to start looking all the models that are in Azure. So I think I lost count. We need to check as we are speaking how many models are there to try to play with them in the playground. And from a developer point of view, lots of them are just APIs and endpoints to call like any other thing you have on Azure. We might be biased by Microsoft, but I really love all the playgrounds. You can see the token consumption already. So this coin that is used for AI and already gives you an idea how this thing works. So I think, Azure can be a really nice starting point, or the new Microsoft Foundry platform that's built on Azure.
Okay, awesome. As we start to wrap up, please remind folks of the name of the book that you've got coming out, roughly where they can get it from. I know I've got a couple of links that I'll put in the show notes. So folks, if you're interested in the book, click the show notes. And then maybe people are listening to this going, Codrina's awesome. I want to be able to keep up with like what she's doing in the social media space, maybe LinkedIn or whatever, so that I can, find out more things as Codrina shares her expertise. What's the best way for folks to do all of those things?
Yeah, so the book is called AI-Enabled Apps with .NET MAUI, published by A-Press. So you can find that on their website, on different platforms, Amazon, and so on. And the book has the GitHub repository connected, so you'll get also the nice part for us. I think the fastest way to get in contact with me is on LinkedIn. So just look for Codrina Merigo. You can also find me on Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, but usually on LinkedIn, I have all the up-to-date information, like the next conferences I'm speaking on, and all the other things that I'm working and updating. So I would say go on LinkedIn and then don't be shy. Write me a message if you have any issue, if you need any help. I'm also a mentor, so don't be shy. As I said, you can just contact me and we can see everything you have, maybe your ideas and your issues and everything that's connected to .NET MAUI, AI applications, and also Microsoft Foundry, which is another topic that I'm speaking at conferences lately.
Amazing. I have to say, Codrina, this has been a fantastic conversation. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I've learned about in this one. So, I say that in every episode, but because hey, listeners, part of the reason I produce this show is so that I can learn more, right? But not just to show off that amazing people out there are doing amazing things, but so that I can learn more. It's part of my continual professional development. But Codrina, I have learned so much about local models and attaching them to .NET MAUI apps. And we talked about privacy concerns, we've talked about accessibility concerns, and a whole bunch of stuff. And we've only really scratched the surface. But what I would like to say is thank you ever so much for spending some time with us today to talk about all of this. And I wish you the best of luck with your book.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you for having me. And it was a really, really great conversation. I know we kind of went off track, but I'm really happy to discover these kind of things and to share with people all over the world.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Modern.NET Show with me, Jamie Taylor. I'd like to thank this episode's guest for graciously sharing their time, expertise, and knowledge with us. Be sure to check out the show notes for a bunch of links to some of the stuff that we covered and a full transcription of the interview. The show notes, as always, can be found at the podcast's website, and there'll be a link directly to them in your podcatcher. And don't forget to spread the word. Leave a rating or review on your podcatcher of choice. Head over to .netcore.show/review for ways to do that. Reach out via our contact page at .netcore.show/contact, or join our Discord server at .netcore.show/discord, all of which are linked in the show notes. But above all, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I hope that I'll see you again next time for some more .NET goodness. I'll see you again real soon. See you later, folks.